there, Gary Parrish. Welcome back. CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting dodo birds. Leaky Black, the Eye on College Basketball podcast, is presented by Jersey Mike's. Jersey Mike's sub above. Matt Norlander is here with me. And though the transfer portal is still spinning fast as ever, the coaching carousel, I hope you've noticed, has come to a stop. Every job, far as I know, is filled. More than 60 jobs have been filled. So let's talk about them. And I want to start with this, Deadleg Norlander. You, if you had to bet your 401k, and I don't know that you would. You don't seem like
I would not. Before you even ask me, I will not. But continue.
Hey, but if I put a weapon to your head,
let's not start off too aggressive here. It's the middle of April.
If I put a bazooka to your head right up against your temple, and I said, you now must bet your 401k, and the only way you get to retain it is if in 5 years we look up and we go, the hire you're about to tell me, that is the actual best hire from the offseason of 2024. What hire do you go with? Maybe this is a different way to put it. Which hire do you believe in most?
Okay, I'm going to narrow this in this Carousel Recap episode that Parrish was begging me to do. Fine, Parrish, I'll finally do the Carousel Recap episode, okay? Just for you, okay? I'm going to limit this to high majors. We will get to a couple of notable mid-major ones because there are. I truly think that the answer here probably would be at the mid-major level, but let's stick to the power conference because we had 14 changes, which is about as many as we've seen in a long, long time. Among that, and before we get out of here, I want to get into our best fits overall and maybe our most intriguing hires. Those are two different things, even if there can be crossover. I think the one that has the best chance of being the most successful long-term. Can I have one stipulation with this?
Sure.
Where I think it's the coach that has the best chance at having the most long-term success and then not leaving necessarily. That's if you're again threatening my life or my 401k
with a bazooka.
Yeah, exactly.
We're next to your temple.
I think my answer here, because this coach really wanted the job, got the job, is a really good fit. The job is very tough, but I think the program over the next 7 to 10 years will be better under this coach than it has been over the previous 10 to 15. I think I'm going to give you Kyle Smith at Stanford. Now, Stanford is moving to the ACC. It is something of a black sheep in that conference, although not as much as SMU. We will obviously get to that as well. But I think Kyle Smith has a really healthy chance at getting Stanford at least semi-regularly relevant in the sport, getting to the NCAA tournament, and he is a very, very good fit. Whereas there are other ones, and I definitely want to hear your answer on this as well. Like Eric Musselman, it could absolutely work. Right. He's going back to Southern California, and we'll get into all the stuff with him even getting that job and reset a lot of this stuff. But he's also going into the Big Ten, which has been a better league on balance over the past 5 to 7 years. He's deeper into his career, and Musselman historically doesn't he's coming off his longest tenure ever at Arkansas, and it's 5 years. So I like buying long term on that. I'm just not entirely sure. Other guys like Danny Sprinkle, Mark Byington, Jake Diebler, these are not proven guys. Dusty May, not even super proven. And then meantime, like what if Kelsey absolutely hits it out of the park, but for one reason or another, he hits it out of the park so much that he leaves Louisville in 5 years or 6 years. I'm not saying, so I'm taking that into calculation as well. My answer would be Kyle Smith. What is your answer, GP?
I considered Kyle Smith. And maybe it'll explain as I actually settle on an answer. You'll understand why I at least considered Kyle Smith, because I think expectations are a part of this. Like the expectations for John Calipari at Arkansas are different than the expectations for Kyle Smith at Stanford. But Stanford has won at an extremely high level consistently before. It's just been a minute, but they've done it. I'm concerned about the conference change. I just, I'd like to see them, how they settle into that thing before I, put my 401k to play along on that one. So I shied away from it, but I don't think it's absurd. Do you know where I've got a handful of names and they're all sort of tied to the same thing. But if I had to put one, and this is going to be Crazy. Like not something I thought I would have said 2 months ago. Not even something I could have imagined saying 2 months ago.
Yeah, are you about to give me Holtman at DePaul right now?
No. Although I do
You're like, don't be ridiculous.
Okay, but the reason I'm not going to give you Holtman at DePaul will play into the same type of argument. I think he's a great coach with a hard job. You know what I'm going with? Jake Diebler at Ohio State.
Oh my goodness. Are you really?
I believe in the job, and I believe in him. Like when he took over that team, he flipped it. They were one of the better teams in the country. I don't want to say top 10 or anything like that, but he flipped that team. What he showed is a level of competence coaching a basketball team and running that basketball program, if only for a month or so, but still for a month or so. And then he's done the job away from the court in the first month of the offseason, the way you need to be able to do the job off the court. He obviously has incredible NIL backing. At least that's my understanding. So, and here's the other thing. He's young and he's not obvious to be the next head coach at Ohio State when he was hired to be the next head coach at Ohio State. You know what that suggests to me? And I always pick up on things like this. I'm always interested in things like this. I promise you, whatever combination of Gene Smith and Ross Bjork were involved in this and other administrators, they did not go into this thing thinking they were hiring Jake Diebler.
Mm-hmm.
He convinced them at some point. They were around him. They saw him work. They talked with him. They talked to other people around him. They got to see it up close. And they said, why are we, or at least they reached a point where they said, why are we continuing to look for our next coach when he's right here in front of us? They believed in him. The same way at Butler, once upon a time, they believed in a Brad Stevens who was young and not obvious. And I'm not saying Jake Diebler is Brad Stevens.
Did you?
No. I'm just saying I am always interested when people look at somebody who isn't an obvious candidate, but they're right there in front of them, and they go, this is the guy. I believe in this guy. And because it makes me go, what did you see? Because that's not something somebody not in the room could have seen. But he did the job on the court. He's done the job away from the court. He convinced, at least on some level, 2 different prominent athletic directors to believe in him. Those are all good signs. And I think he's just set up to win at Ohio State, because I think Ohio State is set up to win in the sport of men's basketball, and frankly, most sports. I believe in Jake Diebler. I remember us even talking about the idea of them hiring him before they did. And I was like, you have to look at it. You can go back and find it, whatever episode it was. I said, you got it. He's done enough to make me, you have to take a hard look at this. And obviously they did. Then they reached the decision they reached. And so far, I can't imagine they'd be happier. I've got him 15th in the top 25 and 1 right now. He has flipped this thing overnight. And I believe in what I've seen so far. He would maybe top my list of the hire I have the most confidence in, that in terms of it's going to reach or exceed the expectations the fans of that school have placed upon it.
Roster-wise, what GP's alluding to here, Bruce Thornton is back to run the point, which is big. Devin Royal also back. Aaron Bradshaw, former 5-star prospect, highly rated prospect, just an up-and-down year at Kentucky, obviously. He is going to Ohio State. Micah Parrish, that's really the reason why. Let's be real here.
My little nephew.
Cousin. Yeah, or nephew. Okay, I thought it was your cousin, but okay.
Sometimes he's my little cousin. Sometimes he's my little nephew.
All right, 23andMe it. I guess I can't keep up with all the family tree stuff. Now, Feliz Akpara got he transferred out recently in the past 48 hours or so. So no Akpara, very good defensive player. We'll see on that where it goes there. And then actually, coincidentally enough, not knowing that you were going to give me Diebler, they may or may not add a very big transfer piece here. You lose Felix Akpara, and then Trey Townsend, who was at Oakland, grad transfer. I was told earlier on Tuesday he is either going to go to Ohio State or Arizona, and that decision is coming this week. So if they were to get Townsend, Horizon League Player of the Year, really, really good player, that would be another big ad there. But we'll see if it's going to be Buckeyes or Wildcats. We'll wait and see on that. Diebler, it is interesting that you give me Diebler, because what I'm about to present you is not my opinion. It is the opinion of people around college basketball, and that's stuff I've gathered over the past month, a very polarizing hire, and understandably so. Super young, got the job after they fired Chris Holtmann on an interim basis on Valentine's Day. And there are some that are skeptical that Ohio State made the right decision. And it's understandable why this opinion would be out there, Parrish, right? You would agree that you're at Ohio State, top 20 job in the country, in the Big Ten. You're adding 4 more teams. You're having an 18-team conference, highly competitive. And now you are choosing to hand the keys to someone who has no Division I experience, was previously on staff at Vanderbilt, and has not had success follow him step by step the whole step of the way. But it certainly is intriguing, and later on the show I'll give you kind of my most intriguing hires. Diebler's on that list because of him being chosen. He brought on Joel Justice, by the way, who was on staff and part of the NC State's Elite Eight run, and now he's deciding to join up, which is frankly at the assistant level, that's a pretty big hire there overall. So we'll see. There is the potential you could be right, but there is the potential that it just misses because he's never done it. Right. And maybe we're looking up in 3 years and Ohio State's making another new hire. You never know.
Yeah. Well, you never know. We could say that same paragraph about every one of these, right? Every one of these. And I want to be clear, I think John Calipari is going to be good at Arkansas, but is it going to reach or exceed expectations? I don't know that. The way I'm sort of trying to define this in my head is in 5 years, which fan base will be pleased the most with the way things have gone since they made this hire in March or April 2024. And what you just said about Jake Diebler being a divisive hire within the industry, because on a surface level, it makes no sense. That's precisely why I believe in it.
Yeah.
All the negatives that those people are trying out to you are the reasons I believe in it, because it makes no sense. There's nothing on his resume that says this guy should be the head coach at Ohio State, right?
Yes.
Nothing.
Yes.
Nothing. But he is. And that means and I promise you, Gene Smith and Ross Bjork and whoever, they didn't plan on this. This was not the plan. There's nobody in December thought Jake Diebler was going to be the next head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes, but he did enough to convince the people who need to be convinced that he's competent enough and talented enough to do the job. And I don't want to overstate it because it's a small sample size, but in every way you can do the job, since he's been given the job, he's done it.
Yes.
There were reports that Bruce Thornton was out 1 foot out the door. Yeah. As soon as they fire Chris on Valentine's Day, he's getting bombarded by other schools. He was able to, that's a huge recruiting win. Don't gloss over. He kept Bruce Thornton. That wasn't easy. Not every coach would have. Not every coach would have. He did that. Yeah. He goes and gets Michie Johnson.
I was going to say, I think I didn't mention before, Michie Johnson. Yeah,
he gets a commitment from Michie Johnson's brother, right? A 5-star prospect in high school. I'm a believer in what Aaron Bradshaw can be, not so much in what he was, but there's a long list of guys who didn't play much at Kentucky, went somewhere else and did, popped. Bryce Hopkins, again, Johnny Juzang, a long list. I'm a believer in what Aaron Bradshaw is going to be. I don't only think Ohio State's going to be good next year. I think they're going to be consistently good. And all the negatives you point out, I can twist them into positives and say, you're exactly right. How did this guy get this job? You're exactly right. There's nothing, if you don't know him and all you do is look at the resume, the Wikipedia page, there's no reason he should be the head coach at Ohio State. The fact that he is, despite of that, I think is actually encouraging.
What's interesting about this cycle, and I guess we should break here, but you can send it in just a second, is this year to me, more than many, many recent years, there were more interconnected tentacles between jobs, and Ohio State opening when it did. Coincidentally enough, DePaul was the first one to open at a power conference level, then Ohio State. And lo and behold, Ohio State's former coach becomes DePaul's current coach. We'll get to Holtmann before we get out of here. Was intriguing, in addition to everything that had downstream effects with Dusty May, and then how that impacted what I really want to get to, which is the butterfly effect that impacted 6 programs with one after another, and we can reset that as well.
Yeah, just some other names that fall under this umbrella. Then we'll break, come back, take the conversation where you want to take it. They're all kind of the same. I believe in the jobs. I think Mark Pope's going to be good at Kentucky. It's probably not, I would have made Billy Donovan tell me no 5 times before I hired Mark Pope. But now that Mark Pope's the coach, I think he'll be fine there. I think he'll be good there. And here's another one, Pat Kelsey. I think he'll be good at Louisville. I just think any competent coach would be good at Kentucky and would be good at Louisville. And frankly, I think the same thing of Ohio State, perhaps a level below those, certainly historically. But I think those are like, if you're a competent coach, you should do well at those jobs. And I know sometimes an injury here, or you get too young, or, there's a dramatic shift in the landscape of college athletics. All of that stuff can play a role in anybody's demise, I guess. But like, I believe in the Kentucky job. I believe in the Louisville job. I believe in the Ohio State job. And I think those three guys, even if none of them are necessarily the people I would have tried to hire initially, I think they'll all three do well there. And in terms of like the more established guys, I think Muss is going to do great at USC. It's just like, for how long? There's nothing in his career that says, he'll be there more than 5 or 6 years at most. So we'll see. But I do think he'll do fine there. And I do think John Calipari will be really good at Arkansas. It's just, will it replicate what Muss did? I don't know. That's tough. And will it satisfy the expectations? I don't know. He wasn't satisfying expectations at Kentucky. That's the only reason he's now at Arkansas.
Well, let's get into that. I guess I'll just toss it over here. I want to get into, again, the domino effect and kind of give quick little intel and some thoughts on the 6 jobs that were impacted that started with SMU, but why actually specifically this dates back to 2022, not even earlier this season. But first, Nada, can we get a word from our partners, please?
Shouts to the Michigan Marauders.
There you go. Shouts to the Michigan Marauders. Okay, so SMU firing Rob Lanier this year triggered what I think is just been an insane carousel cycle. We've had approximately 18% of the entire sport change over, 63 job changes. Oh, by the way, as GP mentioned off the top, the final one, Chicago State, filled over the weekend. So all 63 have changed. Please, knock on wood. Let's get to next season without an off-season unexpected change. We've had a semi habit of that over the past 5 or 6 years. Weirdly enough, or coincidentally enough, at the high major level, 14 changes out of about 80 high major jobs. That's also about 18%. So that is a microcosm of the overall trends. But GP, it wasn't SMU firing Lanier that prompted this. Do you know really why we are here now with the final high major hire of Kevin Young? Do you know the event that really triggered all of this?
I'm gonna rather than take a bunch of guesses, shout out UMass Loyal. I'm gonna let you say it.
Okay. Hang with me here. It was UCLA and USC going to the Big Ten in 2022. The reason why is them deciding to do that, to leave the Pac-12, left the Pac-12 unstable. Okay. So USC, UCLA decided to leave. And then last year, of course, Oregon and Washington eventually decided to join them in the Big Ten, leaving the Pac-12 even more vulnerable and on the precipice of collapse. What happens? It collapses. You have Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah then bolt for the Big 12, leaving the Pac-12 with essentially almost nothing. Ultimately, the ACC doesn't want to feel like it's getting left behind. And so it makes a decision that I still think is just so weird, but whatever. It throws a life raft, if you half inflated life raft to Stanford and Cal, and then SMU just enters the picture and rallies because of essentially oil money, hundreds of millions of dollars to gain inclusion to the ACC and forego TV revenue for the next 7-8 years through the end of this contract. Okay, so all of that was precursor to SMU, after having a good second season under Rob Lanier, and its boosters saying, this isn't good enough. We want a fresh face in here. We're going into the ACC. We have to fire this guy and hire someone else. So it's truly wild to think about that. Kevin Young is now at BYU and John Calipari is at Arkansas. And there's even more with that, but specifically because it all comes back to conference realignment and it all comes back to USC and UCLA deciding to leave to go to the Big Ten. Now, within all of that, SMU then hires Andy Enfield, and that was, a week-long process. They finally got it done. There was fighting behind the scenes, or at least disagreement over buyout terms. The craziest thing to me in all of this, with this specific hire, was that SMU was willing to put up hundreds of millions of dollars to get into the ACC, but it would not pay the extra like $3 million on Enfield's contract, so it sat around for 10 days and waited for it to drop from $5 to $2 million. Okay, sure, why not? You've talked about the Enfield hire previously, but for the purposes of this show, for everyone truly catching up, I know you loved it for Enfield to get a change of scenery. He's going to a program that isn't as good at a school in a conference that isn't as good. But do you have belief that he will find success at SMU? And I'll define it for you. I would say success at SMU will Andy Enfield make multiple NCAA tournaments coaching the Ponies?
Yes. I believe in people who have succeeded consistently in life. I just assume they'll succeed again. And obviously sometimes, there's always a first time for disappointment or not meeting expectations, but I'm a believer in successful people. And like I wrote the column right after Andy was hired at USC because people question that. Like he was totally anonymous mid-major coach heading into that NCAA tournament. And then he wins 2 games at Florida Gulf Coast. His wife becomes a, television star, because she's pretty. And, then he's the USC coach. And people are like, he's never worked there in that part of the country. What has he really done other than won these 2 games? And seems like a big jump and out of nowhere. And I just remember having spent a little bit of time with Andy at the time, but more than that, just talking to people about him and just reading, honestly, his bio. Like whatever this guy's tried to do in life, he's been successful at it.
Yeah.
Among those things, marrying a model, like most people would probably look at Amanda Enfield and be like, I don't even know if I could talk to her, but somehow he was able to talk to her and, the rest, as they say, is history.
And now he's the SMU coach. Yes.
The SMU coach. So I believe in him. And sometimes with this whole, but this program's not that good or historically not as good. And sometimes it's just as simple as, but where has this program been calling home? What's been its neighborhood? Now it's got a different neighborhood. What was TCU before Jamie Dixon and the Big 12 got there? Right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Jamie Dixon altered the course of, and we'll get to him in just a second, but he altered the course of that program by being hired.
Yeah.
There, yes.
So what happened at TCU was a nothing program forever. And then they get into the Big 12 and they hire the right coach. And now they're, consistently one of the top, 20 to 40, 50 basketball programs in America. So like, I'm not ruling out the idea that SMU could benefit in the exact same ways. You now are in a real league with like Duke and UNC, and that could be hard before it gets easy, but I believe in Andy Enfield, and I believe that the conference change can elevate SMU, and that combination, yes, multiple NCAA tournaments for Andy Enfield. I bet on that, sure.
I would, if we were doing the buy, sell, or hold conceit here, I would hold with SMU under Enfield. I do think it's a school in a very weird spot geographically, but then again, the geography and sensible decisions went out the window more than a decade ago when it came to conference realignment. Okay, so he leaves. Then even before Enfield goes to SMU, the rumor mill kicked up about, is it going to be Muss? But names like Buzz Williams, Jamie Dixon, Mark Pope, Nico Medved, all contacted for the USC job. Muss was the perceived leader. He was the actual leader. He wanted the job badly. He gets it. Jenko and the AD was taken with him. But actually, really, kind of the behind-the-scenes thing was that got clinched because there were people of importance at USC that were completely all in on Muss. And I think the late-stage movement were some other coaches or the representation, whether they wanted to leave or not, or just try and, increase their contract deals, as you well know, GP, that happens sometimes. They were not going to be able to get a foot in there. And so then Muss leaves Arkansas to go to USC. I know you talked about him before the break here. I'll give you a quick quip, and then it's all you. I would buy on Muss's future at USC. Now he's coming off a weird 16 and 17 season. The way that he runs a roster, I happen to believe in this era where it's so volatile, you're just going to come up craps, right? Just every so often, it's going to be unavoidable. But to get them to 2 Elite Eights, 3 weekend appearances, with him having SoCal ties, he's had some portal ads in the past, like 4 or 5 days here, like solid gets, but still more work to be done. It seems like it should work. It should fit. But I am also personally, GP, like USC going into the Big Ten and everything that will come with that, I do think it increases the slope. I think it will become more difficult. And I don't think that Muss, happy to be wrong, of course, I don't think that Muss, when we look up 5 years from now, I think his record won't be as good as it was at Arkansas. I think the players he get on balance probably won't be quite as good as what he got at Arkansas. And I don't know if he even makes one Elite Eight, let alone getting, to two of them and having 3-second weekend appearances. I would sell on his success matching what it was at Arkansas, but that doesn't mean he can't have a good positive impact there. It will be intriguing, though, because Enfield had top 5, top 10 picks. He did make an Elite Eight. Like, he was doing well at USC. It just got a little bit kind of like those two coaches are both coming off highly disappointing years, and now they fled for new environments and surroundings. They're probably for the betterment of their overall lives. But I would buy Musselman's future at USC slightly more than I think I would Enfield at SMU.
The problem with trying to grade Muss relative to what he did at Arkansas is like, that's just hard. That's going to be hard. What coach who just got hired is going to do the next 5 years, 3 Sweet 16s and 2 Elite Eights? It's hard.
It's very hard. Yes.
Right.
But he takes the job thinking that he can and will do it, obviously, but actually doing it's another thing. Yeah.
But I think the point you make about roster construction now, I don't care how good of a coach you are. I'd like the phrase you used, crap out. That's going to happen sometimes. It's more difficult now than ever for coaches to know who they're enrolling. Like in a more traditional recruiting landscape, like, pre-NIL and pre-transfer waivers, you would start recruiting people often when they're 15, 16 years old. By the time they were getting ready to make a decision, their mom, dad, girlfriend, whoever you need to know, them. You've known them for years. Person's probably been on campus, 6 different times, unofficial, official, whatever. Now it's like Duke just lost 8 of its top 10 scores.
Yeah.
And they're having to reload, obviously, with the number 1 recruiting class in America, but they're going to have to get in the transfer portal. They've already gotten multiple guys. Like, you can watch all the synergy you want to watch. You don't know what kind of person you're getting anymore and how it's going to fit with the other people you got. And though Muss, I think, arguably before this past season had been the absolute best at that, of just taking pieces from all over and saying, this is my basketball team, let's go. And then pieces from all over, and this is my basketball team, let's go. Like, he did it incredibly well at Nevada, did it well at Arkansas, and then this season, undeniably, he crapped out. But I think it's clearly more of the exception than the rule. And I believe in him doing well at USC. And doing well at USC, though, it's important to note, is not the same as it won't take 3 Sweet 16s in 5 years to feel like he's doing well at USC. For him, the bar is a little lower, I think, than what he has already accomplished at Arkansas. I
agree. But it does become a math problem,
sure.
In terms of just how many teams are going to get in from these leagues. And that will be fascinating in the 18-team Big 12, let alone the 18-team ACC. Okay, and then with the next domino, Arkansas. Obviously, if you listen to every show, we're not going to repeat ourselves too much, but I do want to give a good wide reset here for everyone that wants to check in on all this stuff. The butterfly wing effect here that I think has been most forgotten amid all of this is that Jerome Tang got to the altar with Arkansas and did not go. Now, I talked with Tang subsequent to that, and it was mostly an informal conversation, but he would have no issue with me sharing this. It did come down to, as it often does with a lot of this stuff, a conversation with his wife and children, with his family, about where they were. Did they really want to pack up and move again? How much better for them is the Arkansas job versus the K-State job? And I'm sure the athletic director at Arkansas, Hunter Yurachek, he's already said, no, whatever you read, I've only offered. There's always only one offer when the guy gets it. Like, that's the oldest trope in the book. Okay, because at first there was a lot of Chris Beard buzz, which then prompted Chris Beard to put out his own statement that he wasn't going. And I was told that there were money people around Arkansas that really tried to leverage that. That didn't happen. And then Jerome Tang got there, and it got to the point, because I remember being on site at the stadium, GP, and talking to our HQ folks. I thought Jerome Tang was going to Arkansas, and I thought that we needed to be ready at literally an hour's notice for that to happen. And if Tang had done it, then Calipari is still at Kentucky. Like, it's wild. But you know what? I actually love the decision. I love when guys aren't just necessarily, you're attached to a job, it's a bigger job, you're labeled as a candidate, and you just go. For Jerome Tang, he said this, I think, publicly as well. Go where you're celebrated, not tolerated. And they celebrate him still plenty there at K-State. And so he'll continue to to try and be an impact coach there, and that is quite interesting. Baylor's entire former coaches and current Baylor's impact on this whole thing, and we're getting there, has been wild. So anyway, Arkansas eventually it gets nuts in that Kentucky opening, okay, and luring away Cal, and that at the Final Four, which is just an all-time ridiculous night there. But Arkansas not getting Tang, then the AD meeting Cal in Phoenix to talk about candidates, because they've all been on the record here about this now. They meet Friday of the Final Four, to I think in Cal's hotel room, to talk about candidates. Hunter Yurachek, they go through it for however long they go through it, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes. And eventually, near the end of this meeting, Cal's laid out all this stuff. And then the way Yurachek has told it is, okay, then why aren't you the guy for this job? And after everything we talked about on the show, Parrish, with everything that was happening at Kentucky, in retrospect, it's not shocking whatsoever. But I'm still not used to seeing Cal in those colors.
Right.
I'm going to need probably until mid-February next year to get used to it. But this, to me, is what is the event that made this carousel season as wild as, and we've had recent years where it's been crazy. I have that in my carousel recap. If you look at the past 4 years, the sport has undergone more significant symbolic change in its coaching ranks than I think literally ever before. And this was the capper. I don't know how good Calipari is going to be at Arkansas. He's going to bring over, by the way, Kenny Payne is his lead assistant now. And though it hasn't been announced, Chin Coleman, Chuck Martin are going to join the staff. His son, Brad Calipari, is going to work in player development. I reported that stuff earlier. If you're a Kentucky fan and you see that, you think, didn't have much staff changes there. If you're an Arkansas fan, you're just happy that you got a big name coach there. I don't know if he gets them to a Final Four. And I don't know what the bar will be for Arkansas fans other than to say, we expect you to bring in first-round draft picks, top 10 picks, have us ranked in the top 10 and competing for 1, 2, and 3 seeds. I think it'll probably happen, but Calipari is probably Parrish. He's on the 15th hole, the 16th hole of his career, to abuse an off-used golf metaphor. So I can't wait to watch it. And as of right now, I think Arkansas has 2 players on its roster, but he's going to fill it up with the quickness. What's your quick reset on either how he got the job or him having the job, just, anything in Arkansas's future over the next 3 to 5 years under Cal?
Well, first on Jerome Tang, I was also told if he gets the offer, he'll take it. And, I even passed that along to other people. Obviously never reported it or tweeted it or anything like that. But how this business works. What are you hearing on Tang? I heard he'll take it. And I think he would have if he were a single man.
I probably would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if he were a single man, you can say things and they're great sayings, and there's a lot of truth to them. Stay where you're celebrated, not tolerated. All that stuff works. But I think if you were a single man, he might have taken the job. But even though we often think of these people as just coaches, they're husbands and on the women's side, wives and mothers and fathers. And, it's not just you moving to coach basketball somewhere else. You're pulling kids away from their friends, out of their schools. I can't tell you how many coaches have told me over the years that they quite literally turned down a job because they could not move their daughter in advance of her senior year of high school. Or rather, I've known coaches who have taken jobs but the kid doesn't want to leave school before a senior year of high school. So they live separately from their family for a whole year. Mm-hmm. Even more than a year.
Yeah, that's a common thing. Yeah, more
and
common.
They're miserable.
Yeah.
They hate it. They say it's easier. They say it's great at the beginning. This is what coaches have told me, because you're working all the time anyway, and you don't have the distractions of family, so you can work. But after a while, it's okay, I'm a multimillionaire, but I'm living alone in a hotel without my family. Is this really the point of life? So all of these things play a role in all decision making, and I'm certain that relocating your family again so quickly, that's not an easy thing for a lot of people to do, and I'm certain that played a real role in Jerome's decision. With Cal, I'm like you. I think he'll be good. I don't know that he'll meet expectations. I think a lot of it is, first off, you got to define what the expectations are, but I'm sure they're sky high, and it's going to come down to does this whole humbling experience, because I promise you, Cal never thought he was going to get run out of town anywhere at the collegiate level. And that is, I put this in a column, like when you run John Calipari off, you don't expect to replace him with a guy who's never won an NCAA tournament game. And there were some Kentucky fans that took issue with we didn't run John Calipari off. He went left on his. Yes, you did. Like,
I mean, come on.
You made his life miserable.
It's fine. Like,
it's fine.
You shouldn't even. I figure most Kentucky fans would take pride in that.
Yeah, but you did. You ran him off. It was like he didn't take the Arkansas job because he thinks it's a better job or because he wants to live in Fayetteville instead of Lexington. He took it because, like, at one place, oh boy, he was not even tolerated anymore, much less celebrated.
Yes.
All right. So, like, the past 3 Kentucky coaches, 2 of them you've run off and 1 you fired after 2 years. Like that. That's the truth. And maybe someday Kentucky fans, like, that's something worth looking at. I'm not going to tell Kentucky fans how to feel, but, like, you had one coach win a national championship and then decide I got to get to Minnesota, and another coach say I'm going to Fayetteville. I can't deal with this anymore. So, you did run him off, and. Is he humbled by that at all? And does he look in the mirror at all? Because, I mean, I'm not the first person to make this comment, but Dan Hurley did a interview with, I guess, JJ Redick on his podcast the other day. And there's just clips of it that I've seen. And it's like, he's the coach of the 2-time back-to-back national champions. And he's just talking about the recruiting process and talking about, actual X and O stuff. And it's just stuff like either you've never heard John Calipari say anything like that, or it's in fact the opposite of everything John Calipari has ever said. Like, Dan Hurley's like, I'm not going out and just trying to take as many 5 stars as I can take. Like, I'm not taking somebody whose goal it is to get to the league as fast as possible. Like, we understand all this stuff, but I'm really looking for people who have winning shit about them, is the phrase that he used. And I think John could be, and I hope John would tell you this, better at that. Because that all that NIL money that he's going to have and just the cachet that he brings to the job, that is going to get him players. He'll have among the most talented rosters every season, including next season. Just wait and see. He'll have one of the most talented rosters every season. But you ready for this? He's had that for 15 straight years, more or less, at Kentucky, and it really fell off after 2015. So his ability to just have an incredibly talented roster that he puts together, that has not been enough to satisfy expectations at Kentucky. So when people say, well, John's going to be great at Arkansas because he's got NIL money and he'll get all the players he wants. Okay, but he had NIL, regardless of what anybody says, he had it. They were bragging less than a year ago at Kentucky about nobody's doing better than Kentucky at NIL. So, like, he's had all the advantages and he still got ran out of town. Will he adjust his roster construction philosophy, his coaching philosophy? Will he emphasize, instead of making billionaires, winning at the collegiate level? I think it's another thing Dan Hurley talks about. Like, my job is not to get people to the NBA. I'm happy to do it, but my job is not to get them to the NBA. I'm paraphrasing here. Don't quote Dan Hurley saying that. But, like, he's more or less saying, my job is to win basketball games at UConn. That's the priority. And when you enroll at UConn, your job is to win basketball games at UConn. That should be your priority. And if those are both our priorities, all of us will get everything we're after, but that's got to be the priority. And yet John and this aggravated Kentucky fans, going all the way back to 2010, consistently talked about preparing people for the NBA, changing families, and all that stuff is great, but that can't be the priority. And if it continues to be, you'll continue to get what you've been getting. Unless he adjusts, it could be bumpy. But I think he's smart enough to adjust, and if he does, then there should be good things there.
So Arkansas closes, Kentucky opens, obviously. Now, we have talked about Pope so much. I want to basically go back and listen to the GP did a couple of pods, and then we talked about Pope with me last week. So I don't want to dig back into that. I can just give you quick newsy stuff, I guess. Because Kentucky fans, man, they're like the most online fan base out there. Internet never dies there. Cody Feger came over from an assistant with Pope to be expected. Jason Hart is joining the staff. Those have been officially announced. And then this has been put out there, but Alvin what's wild is Scott Drew turned down. Okay, so Scott Drew turns down Kentucky. He turned down Louisville as well. I think he will go down in the history of this planet as the only man to turn down Louisville and Kentucky in the same year. I honestly don't know if we'll ever live to see that again. That's wild.
Well, yeah, I mean,
at least sitting college coach. Like maybe there's an amazing NBA coach 79 years from now, but that's just crazy to me.
Well, like it can only happen if they happen to open in the same year.
Yes,
right?
And the odds of that as well?
And like anybody who gets one of those jobs should be there for a decade. You should be. And that's why even earlier when you said Pat Kelsey, like I hear you, like you never know, but Louisville's the type of job once you got it going, once you're so good at Louisville that somebody else might want you, you just stay at Louisville, don't you?
Well, Calipari's now at Arkansas. So you just never know. That was 15 years as well. So I hear you. I hear you the whole way. So
I just think if Cal would have continued to flourish at Kentucky, he never leaves Kentucky.
Right.
You only leave Kentucky and Louisville if you need a parachute out of there.
Correct. So anyway, Scott Drew stays at Baylor, and he loses one assistant, John Jacobs, to FAU. And we'll get before we get out of here, I'll just a few notable mid-major ones. Jacobs is certainly one of those. So he lost one assistant, and then Alvin Brooks III is, he's Drew's right-hand guy, top assistant there. He is being courted by Kentucky for the other assistant job. He has not made his decision. We will have that decision within 24 hours. And if he goes, then Pope will have his 3 on the road guys. He's bringing in Mark Fox, who former Georgia Nevada coach. Fox gave Pope his first job when he decided to get into coaching like 14 years ago. And so he's basically like, he's the guy, he's the North Star for Mark Pope. So he's going to come on and like assistant to the head coach and all this stuff. And then there's going to be a 5th guy that they're not really getting in on that just quite yet. But he's got 3-4 players on the roster right now. The vibes continue to be pretty good. He's going to take a visit. I think the visit is actually today. This is stuff that's been reported elsewhere, but he's going to go see Quaintance, the 5-star guy who was previously committed to Kentucky. He's going to do an in-home with them today. And I think Kentucky's fans are just so hungry for a tangible update every hour. And I get it. I think to speak to this, and I do want to move on because we've talked so much about Kentucky and Pope, but I think they can't believe how much they love this dude already, which is frankly inspiring. And partly why I wanted to do this episode, GP, is that Cal going to Arkansas and Pope going to Kentucky is super fascinating and really great really great for the sport. You've got Pitino on the record saying he's going to get a home and home on the book starting next season with Kentucky to return to Lexington. That's not happening if Cal is there, obviously. So Pitino returning to Lexington and then Kentucky coming up to play St. John's at the Garden the year after that. There's so much here, and Pope he really does get it. So if you want a quick comment, you can, but we've talked so much about him. I don't want to really belabor the point there. There's a lot still ongoing with Kentucky, and we will have more news with commitments of players and staff stuff by the end of the week.
I think it's been fascinating to watch how the fan base has processed this. Because when it happened, I guess the news broke on Thursday night, perhaps confirmed on Friday morning. I forget the timeline, but I think by the time we went to bed Thursday night, it was clear that
right.
Mark Pope was going to be the next head coach at Kentucky. So I wrote a column the next day, and I sort of based a lot of it off of the initial reaction to the news that Mark Pope was the priority, and as you reported, that Mitch Barnhart didn't seriously pursue Billy Donovan. So those two things, hold up, we didn't even really try to get Billy Donovan this time, and hold up, we're just going ahead and hiring somebody who, again, this isn't the way I think of him, but it's just the type of thing that was out there that night. Somebody who's never won an NCAA tournament game. There was a real shock factor and disappointment. And by Sunday, when they introduced him at Rupp Arena, everything had changed. And that's very, I've seen that before. Frankly, the last time somebody had to replace John Calipari, it was the exact same experience. The hiring process was a little more difficult than maybe they thought it would be. They missed on some people, and they end up hiring Josh Pastner. What? People flipped out. And then it was like, okay, but this is our guy now, and we better wrap our arms around him and set him up to succeed because, we got to prove we're bigger than John Calipari. And I think the Kentucky fans admirably leaned into that, showed up, and I think Mark has been brilliant in every way since getting that job, whether it's just being accessible and being, talking to people that Cal had cut off relationships with for whatever reasons, Kentucky sports radio, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as big of a deal that he showed up at the airport to pick somebody up.
It's not. I
saw the tweet and I'm like, yeah, most coaches do that.
It does. That is a common thing. But as someone at Kentucky expressed to me on Monday, and this was said lovingly. I swear this was said lovingly. He's like, these KSR people, man, they're in the bushes. They're everywhere. So the fact that these recruiting trips, you're not allowed to talk about them publicly, but no one's stopping you from taking pictures. Like Pope shows up at Keeneland with Amari Williams, big time Drexel transfer. He's now going to commit there. It's a whole new world. And I'll say this before you finish your point. You hear the term, and we can go deeper into this on a Kentucky offseason pod when we break down the whole roster. You hear the term like players coach out there a lot. Pope is a fans coach, and that he is using to his benefit and will for this entire offseason. And it's it's genuine, but I can't remember the last time, and there have been, to a coach at this level, acknowledging the influence, power, feelings, existence, everything with a fan base, like to this level, Parrish. He has done it he has swayed pretty much everyone. And as a neutral observer, I just find it to be fascinating. And you can feel the invigoration within the fan base. Cause as we said, even when Cal and Mitch Barnhart, quote unquote, made good, I told you the only reason he was there was because they couldn't get out of it. And the second there was a door that was cracked, bada bing, he's gone. Pope is there. And now we've got a whole new thing to follow in college hoops. Yeah. And I would have made Billy Donovan tell me no. I'll never move off of that. Cause I don't want to, be talking out of both sides of my mouth. I not only would I have done it, I think I could have got it done. Let me ask you that. I don't think I've ever asked you that. Could Kentucky hired Billy? Could Kentucky had hired Billy Donovan? I cannot say the answer is yes. Based on conversations I have had, I hold firm in this opinion that if Kentucky had been willing to wait, and you know what, Kentucky fans, many of them were probably like, nah, we're good. We want to ride with an alum. We want to see how this goes. Sure. Because it was also told to me that Mitch Barnhart did not want to have another coach come in, and Billy Donovan, he's not like Cal in a lot of ways, but it would have been the thing with Billy show, a big time coach, 2-time national champ, everything that comes with that. There's nothing wrong with it, but you hire Mark Pope, there's less dressing there. Right. But in fairness, Dan Hurley, Scott Drew also bring that same stuff. You're not wrong about that whatsoever. You're not at all. So Scott's not the. I wouldn't say Scott. I wouldn't say Scott. I could see John can be difficult. I would imagine Dan could have his moments. Yeah. Scott seems like he's pretty. He comes with the same level of cachet, but yeah. They're different guys, but what it is. What it was told to me, expressed to me through multiple people that the one thing about Mitch Barnhart that why he prioritized Pope, and I said we'd be quick on Kentucky. Here we are. I swear we'll move on. Was Kentucky guy and personality, everything that came with him. There was just so much less. Okay, so I firmly believe that had Barnhart waited for the bowl season to end, and it is now over, right, that he would have been able to have a very serious conversation / interview with Billy Donovan about taking the Kentucky job. I'm not saying he would have taken it. I'm not saying he would have truly, seriously considered it. I'm saying, based on people I've talked to who would absolutely know this, I think you would have had a real chance there. But what happened was the timing didn't line up, and Billy Donovan, to his credit, I suppose, was like, I appreciate this, but I'm trying to get my team into the playoffs. Right. And the way that he is wired just wasn't going to mess around with that. And so Barnhart made a calculation. Now they have Pope. So there it is. So, unfortunately, I think Kentucky fans have moved past that point. Yeah. But I do think that had they waited, and then it would have been obvious, they hadn't hired a coach, or it would have been obvious. And so there would have been all the more attention. It actually would have been a little bit of a tempest there. And all that would have come with that. I don't know if you would have gotten him. Ultimately, the guy they got, I think, is I don't know if it's for necessarily absolutely for the better than the alternative, but I can't fault Barnhart for taking the route he took. Yeah, if Mitch just says this is the guy I believed in and this is who I wanted to hire after missing on Dan Hurley and Scott Drew, how am I gonna? I can't really argue with that. You just better be right, because if you have to move on from this coach, they'll probably move you too. Right. And Mitch is at retirement age. So whatever. But if you're going to do something like this, you better be right. I'm not here to make any big proclamations
about it other than what I personally would have done is waited on Billy Donovan, put a full court press on him. And I can't say for sure he would have said yes, but I can say for sure he would have seriously considered it. And here's how I can know that. Because Billy's a smart guy and it would be stupid not to seriously consider it. He's probably like, if they have NBA hot seat list for coaches next season, he's probably on that.
Yeah.
Right. So if you are on the hot seat for a middle of the nothing Eastern Conference franchise going nowhere, or you can coach Kentucky, you would be crazy not to consider that. Every other time Kentucky tried to hire him, he was a national championship coach in the same league at a place where his name would someday be on the court. All right. That's a hard place to leave. It ain't hard to leave a middle of the Eastern Conference going nowhere Bulls franchise when they might be ready to move on from you in less than a year anyway. He would be crazy not to consider it. He would have considered it. I don't know if he would have actually done it, but either way, it doesn't matter now unless Mark Pope isn't successful. And here's the thing. I think he'll be successful because he's clearly, despite lack of NCAA tournament wins, he's clearly a talented basketball coach. Like there's enough data to suggest he's a talented basketball coach. And I heard people wonder about, recruiting at this level, but I think recruiting experience at that level has never been less important. Just show up with your Kentucky shirt on, tell them what your NIL package is and get the signature. That's what recruiting is these days.
A lot of it. Yeah. So let's tell that to Kentucky fans who want half the roster filled already. And I think they've got 2-3 guys on the roster right now, but you're not wrong. We still have, look at us. We are cooking right now, GP. All right, last domino is BYU. So Pope leaves, BYU opens. Super intriguing hire. Kevin Young, I understand most people, if you're a BYU fan listening, yes, we finally almost at the hour mark. We got to your program here. But he is a long time, he's young. He's like 42, but he's a long-time NBA assistant. He has 1 year of experience ever coaching in college. He did a stint like 15 years ago at Utah Valley. And ever since then, like he's been a G League coach for 3 different franchises. He's been the lead assistant with Phoenix. He's still coaching. This I want your take on. Let me lay out BYU and then have GP do it. And we should probably do one more break before we get to the rest of the hires. So Kevin Young is hired. He's hired because he's identified by AD Tom Holmoe. Like so Pope got the Kentucky job on the Thursday of that week. Cal got rumored on Sunday. So I think the Monday after Cal wasn't officially there, the Monday of the title game, I think Tom Holmoe identifies that he wants Kevin Young above all others. So he identifies him. There's a billionaire named Ryan Smith, the guy who's moving the Coyotes to Utah, the NHL franchise. He's involved in this. He gives Kevin Young a deal that I was told it's private, but I had a good source tell me 7 years, about $30 million for a BYU men's basketball coach is like crazy money. More power to you. He gets a big raise. He was the highest paid assistant in the NBA. No one thought that he'd take the job because he turned down the Brooklyn Nets job, GP, this year. Like he turned down that job and is going to go willingly coach in college. He's going to bring a couple of NBA guys with him. At least one of them is going to be an assistant there. Brandon Dunson, I don't think it's out there yet. He will officially be a coach at BYU on the assistant stuff either today or tomorrow. That should get done there. But I am fascinated by this because he is someone who has a really, really good track record at the NBA level, but has never run a program, has 1 year of college experience. He's doing it at BYU, which, as you well know, is just a different school, more of us than there are of them, et cetera, et cetera. Here we go. And he might only have they might look up and only keep 4 or 5 players, which for BYU would still be a big haul considering the kind of guys they get in there from what they had with Pope. I have no idea how this is going to go. It is one of my most intriguing hires. They've had, I think, 7 guys already go in the portal. I don't think guys like Dallin Hall, like Richie Saunders, I think he's going to go to Kentucky and follow Pope there. Dallin Hall's hearing from a lot of big programs. I don't think he's going to return, but I never put it past BYU because it's a different kind of school. What are your thoughts? We have not talked about this at all. This is, of all the hires you talk about, GP, this one is distinctly different from everyone else because BYU, freaking Brigham Young University, plucked one of the most prestigious assistant coaches in the NBA to come and coach BYU. And if you weren't already familiar, he's obviously from the area, didn't go there, but has ties to Salt Lake City, Danny Ainge, and et cetera, and that's why he's there.
You can't get offered the Brooklyn Nets job and a Big 12 job without being impressive, right? Like you just can't, as an NBA assistant coach with very little college experience. If you were I do think NBA assistant coaches can sometimes get offered NBA head coaching jobs just because they've been on staff with somebody who's really good. And USC, it's like Chiefs coordinators get head coaching jobs, and Eagle coordinators get head coaching jobs. And I do think that happens sometimes in the NBA. Like, he's an assistant for this guy, he must be great. And then you get him, and it's like, oh wow, he looks more like an assistant than a head coach. But when you when you have NBA people trying to hire you and college people trying to hire you, that suggests you're impressive. So I don't have any doubt that he can coach basketball and run practices and all of that stuff. I would be hesitant. I'm just being like, this could be a home run. I don't have enough. I don't know Kevin Young. At least I don't think I know him.
I don't know Kevin Young at all either.
Okay.
So,
right.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that he's an impressive basketball person. I would be real hesitant if I'm trying to hire him and he told me, but I've got to stay with Phoenix through the end of this.
It's wild. I'm fascinated by this, man.
And by hesitant, I think that might have been a deal breaker for me if I were BYU. I think I would have said, we want you here now. You're our guy.
Yeah.
But if you can't come now, we're not. Like, I think there's a difference between waiting a few days for Billy Donovan as opposed to, you're going to have to wait.
You could theoretically, it's not going to happen. You could theoretically wait until June until he's running your program.
That's insane. You can't do that. You can't. I don't like educate a guess. It ain't going to be till June. It might not be past,
next
Sunday.
Monday.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. They could get swept. I don't think they are, but every game Phoenix wins is another 3 days that you got to wait while the transfer portal is getting plucked clean. I don't know. I have no issue with hiring Kevin Young because, like, how could I? It would be stupid for me to have like strong opinions about Kevin Young. I never met the guy, as far as I know. But I have real issues with like maybe not being able to take the job for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks when this is a very important time in the calendar. This might have been a deal breaker for me.
So here, because I obviously asked about this, a couple things. One, yes, he is still on the job with the Phoenix Suns, but he's dedicating, at least the way it was expressed to me, as much time to BYU as he is to Phoenix. But you're still splitting time. Like, now, what was also a key point on this and all of this is at BYU of the LDS faith, at least half the roster, they're going to want to be there because it's BYU. Like, it doesn't matter who the coach is. So half the roster is going to be there regardless. And the player that you are recruiting there, like, he can still recruit and do all of that while he's coaching Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. And maybe there's advantages there, but I don't necessarily disagree with you. It is kind of wild. And this was pointed out to me as well, which I do find intriguing. And I don't know if it will have carryover effect or not. If they wind up having massive Tom Holmoe, the AD, is like, this is no. We are hiring this guy hoping that he can be with us 5, 7, 10 years. Although if he absolutely kills it, you can easily see a future in which he goes back to the NBA. But they're not worried about getting behind for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks now. Well, I get it, but still. And then the other element to this is having coached in the G League. Apparently, there was 1 year where he had like 70 different players that he coached on one roster in the G League. So he is very used to roster turnover and just dealing with that. Now, it is different in the G League than it is in college. Like, it is very different, but hey, it's something different here. And the fact that BYU got him and it didn't even go through its normal, and as Nada pointed out in our private chat, appreciate you, buddy. Ryan Smith is also the owner of the Jazz. Like, they wanted him. They went outside their norms to hire him, which was like kind of shocked everyone around the process there. We'll see if it works. So it's very interesting in the Big 12, the best league in the country, that they are starting from behind, and we'll see ultimately what their roster looks like. We still have more jobs to get to, GP, and we're like an hour in. I think we should probably break one more time before maybe bam, bam, bam on the rest of it.
Let's make that money. Let's make that money. Give me Anderson Cooper, Nada.
And they're starting to get in the groove.
So impressive.
Block your schedules. Aces are coming to CBS Sports Network.
To the Grand Rapids Rise.
Supernovas there. If you're not watching on YouTube, you need to watch to get the references there. Okay, let's get through the rest of the high majors of note here so we can satisfy every fan base. If you've listened through this podcast for an hour, we appreciate you. Let's talk Louisville. How about this? Let's talk the two other jobs impacted by Dusty May's decision. So Louisville gets Pat Kelsey. Dusty May goes to Michigan there. Kelsey is he wasn't the first choice. He wasn't the second choice. He wasn't the third choice. However, 261 and 122 career record. That equates to having won 68% of his games, GP. That is top 20 in the sport among all active coaches with at least 10 years of experience. He has done a really, really good job. He's 48 years old, starting to get some portal ads. Corin Johnson, the sixth man of the year from the Pac-12's there. They got Terrence Edwards Jr., who I think is a sneaky good pick up out of JMU after what he did. Ali Khalifa, speak of BYU, he's rehabbing, I guess, a knee. He's got a redshirt, the rare transfer redshirt. He's trying to bring it back, but he's a good player, good passing big man. He will not play for Louisville this upcoming season. Your thoughts on Louisville getting Kelsey? And I'll say it's a matter of fact, and I'm not saying it in a negative way, and also settling for Kelsey after the school. I'm just telling you, they thought they were getting Dusty May. Josh Aird, the athletic director, thought he was getting Dusty, and then just didn't see it coming. He goes to Michigan. We'll get to them in just a second. But I think Kelsey, all things considered, that seems like a pretty good hire. I do. Again, buy, sell, or hold the future. I would lean more buy than hold with Kelsey at Louisville because I think he is mentally and physically equipped to do it. He will not be. It's funny. Him and Pope, they're different kind of energetic, but both of these schools and both of these fan bases, they now have these like such outwardly projecting, optimistic, I want to hear from the fans vibe. It's
Right.
kind of crazy to see how those situations have both changed in very unexpected ways over the past 6 weeks.
Yeah, I think Pat will be good at Louisville. I said that at the top. I do think it's because, first off, you mentioned earlier the Arkansas AD talking about we never offered the job. We only offered the job to one person. I wish two things for press conferences, introductory press conferences. No AD can ever again say we only offer the job to one person when the whole world knows that that's not actually true. It might be technically true.
Yeah, exactly.
but you're lying or at least misleading. And no coach can ever say, I was my wife's third choice too. I imagine that was funny the first time somebody said it. Somebody should look up who was the first coach to ever say that.
I wonder. I'm going to say Billy Tubbs, but by the way, I'm proud to declare I was my wife's first choice. Just so we're clear, I'm going to stunt on this show right now. I was actually my wife's first choice. So
I can't say for sure if mine was my wife's first choice. I mean, I'm sure she had bigger dreams. I'm sure.
Okay.
I couldn't have possibly been my wife's first. Look at me. I mean, what are we talking about? I couldn't possibly have been my wife's first choice.
GP live checking on GP's wife.
I was wrong.
Okay.
Yeah. She's regretting it every day. So, but like, it's just not funny anymore. It's just.
I hear you.
It's not funny anymore. I think he'll be good there. I wrote a column after he was hired, and it's one of those where I stand by every word. I wish I wouldn't have written it. Because it suggests things that I don't actually believe. I just thought it was interesting. Like I think I was on a plane. I barely remember it, but something along the lines of Pat Kelsey may be great. He may not be great. We'll see. But like, he is the least accomplished coach that Louisville has hired in my lifetime. Like, it was just 6 years ago or whatever, they hired the coach away from his alma mater.
You don't need to walk away from this opinion. What are you talking about?
Because when I say he's the lead, that's the thing that got clipped.
But it's not inaccurate. That's okay.
No. But it's like, oh, you must hate the Pat Kelsey hire. No, I don't actually hate the Pat Kelsey hire. I just thought it was interesting that, like, he may be great, but this is true. He is the least accomplished coach Louisville has hired in my lifetime. Now, they haven't hired a lot, but the ones that, they hired Rick Pitino and they hired Chris Mack. And I know the Mack thing didn't work out, but he was.
Go back and look at where Mack was when
Raymond
they hired him.
Champ with a 1 seed at his alma mater.
Yeah,
and
he was killing it.
And even that guy couldn't say no to that job. That's where that job was not too long ago. And this time you were again, this is the type of thing that it sounds bad, but it's true. You were reduced to hiring Pat Kelsey. You didn't want to. That's not who you thought you were hiring. That's not who you tried to hire first, but then you had to. Maybe not had to. Maybe that's overstating it. But you reached a point where you were hiring somebody you didn't think you were going to hire a month earlier. That happened. And I would like to get your thoughts on this. So we just went through coaching changes, and 3 of, I think you would safely say top 20. I think others might say top 15, top 10. 3 of the top something jobs in America opened: Kentucky, Louisville, Ohio State. And
I would put GP. Let's go 5 of the top 20. Michigan and Arkansas are 5 of the top 20.
Okay. 5 of the top 20, but I really wanted to focus on those 3.
Fair enough.
2 don't fit as well to the point I'm going to make. But how about this? 5 top 20 jobs in America. One of them hired somebody who just needed to leave where he was at. That's Arkansas.
Hall of Famer, but let's just call it a Hall of Famer.
Of course, right. You get it. But like, it's obvious, very specific circumstances that led to that. The other one hired who was the hottest mid-major coach.
I understand what you're going with now. I got you.
Ohio State, Louisville, Kentucky ended up hiring Mark Pope, Jake Diebler, and Pat Kelsey. Does that say anything about how difficult it is to hire coaches these days? That I promise you, they can all say whatever they want to say. None of the people at those schools thought that they were, on the day their jobs opened, thought they were hiring Mark Pope, Pat Kelsey, and Jake Diebler, but that's what happened.
You can twist this around all sorts of ways, because this is also factually true. Michigan hired the coach that Ohio State passed on. Like, and think about those 2 schools in the rivalry, and it means more on the gridiron than, but it's true. It's absolutely true. Because there was definitely a point where it seemed like Dusty May was going to go to Ohio State, and it was like Ohio State or Louisville, and then all of a sudden that wasn't going to happen for him at Ohio State there. Also, to this effect, the status of a school still means something, but it's never meant less. And a lot of it is, what situation am I walking into? What will the roster be? What will I lose? How much in NIL are you giving me? I mean, one thing, and this is not a secret by any means, it's not the only thing. In fact, the biggest reason why Scott Drew didn't go to Kentucky was his family did not want him to go. Same thing with Jerome Tang. Definitely a major factor. In fact, I'm almost positive Mrs. Drew listens to the pod. She's probably nodding her head along with this, because they were not all on board about that. And by the way, more power to you for that. But in addition to that, Baylor was able to, and the president, Linda Livingstone, was able to rally more in NIL money this year than ever before. And that is also a factor in a lot of this stuff, because coaches, if you're candidates at jobs and you really do have options, what you don't want to do is walk into a situation where you are set up to fail, or just so much further behind, perceived or real, with other schools that you're going to be competing against. And that also leads to this. There's a lot of factors here, but it has never been more difficult. Remember 10 years ago when it was, I don't want to say outrageous, but it was like a lingering talking point, like Shaka Smart's not leaving VCU. And like Shaka Smart, like in a weird way, like he almost set the template for a lot of this stuff, because he just straight up, and NIL wasn't a thing then, obviously, but you get a lot more of that now than you used to. Doesn't mean it's bad. Doesn't mean it's a bad reflection on your program. But this cycle, it's, 77 other different storylines that it birthed out. I couldn't help but notice that was also a case there, both publicly with moves you saw, and then privately with stuff that never gets reported out and the public doesn't generally know about, guys that did or did not wind up taking certain jobs there. It plays a major factor. It's never been tougher.
Yeah, no, like one of the main things you need to know now is not, hey, where do I work? What is your history? That's not nearly as important anymore as, am I the Dodgers or am I the Royals?
Yeah.
Like, do I have Dodger money to spend, or do I have Royals money to spend? And sometimes the Dodger, like, here's the great thing about NIL, and where the gap this is what people were scared of. Like, all the biggest schools are going to buy the best players. Yeah, but it's up to the biggest schools to decide who's the biggest schools. All it takes is one billionaire to say you're one of the biggest schools, and you are. Like, I've made this point before. It's dramatic, but you'll get the point. If there was a billionaire who loved women's soccer living in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and decided they wanted to make Southern Miss women's soccer one of the top 10 programs in America by throwing $10 million at it, they could do that just like that. So you might think, oh, Kentucky, Carolina, Kansas, Duke, those, yeah, they are. But you can, if Baylor, if Scott Drew says, I'll stay here, but I need you to be able to give me the same type of stuff for NIL that Kentucky was going to give me, They have the ability to do that. And once that is done for you, there ain't a whole lot of difference these days between recruiting Baylor and recruiting Kentucky if you can match them dollar for dollar.
Correct. On that note, a quick nugget for Baylor fans, if you've lasted this long. I'm told that if Alvin Brooks were to leave Baylor for Kentucky, you're not losing VJ Edgecombe. He will still come in. That's a high-quality 5-star freshman that's set to come in there, so just keep an eye on that. Brooks was the lead recruiter on Edgecombe. As always, I guess wait and see. Michigan gets Dusty May, 5-year deal, $3.75 million on average, has done immediately well in the portal. Brought on Mike Boynton from Oklahoma State to be his lead assistant. Also brought on, shout-outs to the Bears, but Akeem Miskadeen, fellow Chicago Bears fan. I've got the draft coming up in 2 days. I had to rock the Bears stuff. Come on now, let's go. We're getting pumped for this NFL draft. GP has already filled out his staff. Added Danny Wolf from Yale, who I have seen multiple times in person, and is like, I don't know who's going to be the big transfer to pop, and I'm not saying it's going to be Danny Wolf, but I think he's ready to be a stud at the high major level. I would say of everyone we've talked about, it feels like Dusty May has done the most impact of all the new guys in new places, period. Sam Walters from Alabama is in there. I think even Kentucky was trying to get him, but they got him. They got Trey Donaldson from Auburn. They got Roddy Gale from Ohio State. Reuben Jones from North Texas. Justin Pippen, Scotty's son. I know you were all over that recruitment, GP. 4-star guard. And then they're not done. There's going to be at least, I'll just say, one other player that Dusty May has coached is going to commit here pretty soon here. So they have done a big time job there. It's a pretty good fit. I feel like we talked about May plenty on the pod, so we don't have to go too deep here, but it's a good ad. He feels like he fits Michigan well, and we'll see if he can handle being a high major coach in a very competitive conference with a lot of advantages, a really good job, a really strong staff, by the way, and see if he can get it done. Seems like a good hire, and it's funny, after all the buildup, like he's going to go to Louisville. Now that everything's settled, like Dusty May at Michigan just feels like it fits right. I don't know. That seems like the right ending.
Thought. I, like many, like if I were just ranking jobs, I would have ranked the Louisville job ahead of the Michigan job. And so when you're having conversations, a month out, 2 months out, I mean, Lord, it was pretty obvious from November or even before that Louisville was going to be making a coaching change. And if Dusty May is the top candidate on the board and that's the top job available, well, that seems like that makes some sense. But when Michigan opens, and you start thinking through it from a personality perspective, everything, it does feel like Michigan's just probably a better fit. Some people like run to the light and some people don't need it. If you're the head coach at Louisville, you are the most famous person in that city, one of the most famous people in that state. You're the face of everything.
I'm told this was an impact on, by the way, Dusty May's decision.
And when you're the coach at Michigan, you're less of that. You're the basketball coach at the University of Michigan. That's, it's a different deal. Let me ask you this. Do you think Michigan knew they were hiring Dusty May when they fired Juwan?
No, but I think they probably quickly realized that they were going to have the in on it, and they were very deft at getting that done. But when they fired him, like when Ward Manuel and the people that finally, because remember the Juwan Howard stuff, when that happened was semi-surprised. I mean, there had been no public indication that that's where we're leading. No, but I would suspect that within 6 to 12 hours of it being done, that it became clear that they had a very, very good shot.
It's often when there's one of those that it could go either way.
Yeah.
Or you don't even think it's going to go a certain way, and then it does. It's often like, well, they knew, okay, we don't know if we would do this under different circumstances, but this guy we can get this guy now. And if we don't get him now, we can't get him next year, and we can't get him in 3 weeks. So let's do this now. Like the Rob Lanier one felt a little bit like that. Like
absolutely. That one felt as telegraphed as any. Yes.
Like they know what they're doing when they do this. They're not just firing Rob Lanier so they can open a coaching search. Like, hey, do you want Andy Enfield? Then fire your guy. All right, let's do this then. And the Michigan thing, it just had a hint of that. Like, all right, we're kind of, do we want to do this? Fire an alum, Fab Five, give it another year, or Dusty May will come with you right now. All right, let's just do it. Boom. It had a hint of that.
Yeah. I think he did struggle with the decision, but ultimately, it was clear that was his preferred destination. Here he is, and we'll see how many more spots they have to fill. But yeah, they've killed it in the portal to this point, and that's no surprise. Let's go bing bang boom with the rest of these jobs here. We are going long, but hey, hopefully people appreciate this one, kind of giving you a full recap. I'm going to go this in chronological order of the way the rest of the high major jobs filled. So DePaul was first. Chris Holtman, 6-year deal. I don't know. I don't know. Like, this is an intriguing one to me. The job is terrible. The school has been terrible. It's gone 20 years without making a tournament. Holtman's a pretty good coach, but he walks into the toughest spot in the Big East. He didn't want to sit around and do TV for a year, which he easily could have done. He, by the way, speaking of TV, he brings on Laval Jordan, who's going to be like his GM there. So that's obviously a big name in addition to everyone he's filled out his staff with. It's not a shoulder shrug. It's toss the papers in the air and just let's see, Parrish. If Chris Holtman even gets DePaul to one NCAA tournament, it's going to be one of the big. I'm not kidding. It's going to be maybe the biggest coaching job of his career because this program's so bad. What are your thoughts?
I love it for DePaul.
How can you not? This is the best possible candidate they could have possibly imagined to hire.
If I told DePaul fans honestly 2 months earlier, you're going to hire Chris Holtman, they've been thrilled.
Yep,
they should be. You said pretty good coach. I'll take it a step higher, and I know you don't mean that as a slight, but like I think he's very good.
Yeah,
I think he's very good, and
he doesn't get enough credit. I think that's the problem.
Well, no thanks to you.
Yeah,
if anybody can win at DePaul, Chris Holtman can win at DePaul, but
I think the answer is if anyone can win at DePaul, it's Ray Meyer, but maybe Chris Holtman's number 2.
Jerry had a minute too.
Mr. Wainwright. That's right.
You know, man, I was raised on the Metro Conference, but I transitioned to the Great Midwest.
That's right.
I've been in a league with the DePaul Blue Demons. First game ever for the University of Memphis Tigers at the Pyramid, which is now a Bass Pro Shop.
Yes, of course.
It was against the DePaul Blue Demons. And it's been all downhill for DePaul since then, for the most part. But
yes, it has.
But listen, it's a hard job. One of the hardest power conference jobs in the country. It might be true that nobody can win there, but if somebody can, I think it's Chris. I think one NCAA tournament before he's fired or moves on. I'll say yeah. I think he does.
Oh man, I can't. I'm sorry, Holtman. I can't do it. I can't.
It's times like these when you realize who really believes in you and who doesn't, huh?
Hey, listen, I stuck to my guns. I refused to pick against UConn to win by double digits. It never happened. I'm going to pick against DePaul making the NCAA tournament until it happens in a 20-year span. Plus.
Oh man, it's times like these when you realize who believes in you and who doesn't.
How about this? I'm the a-hole either way, because I'm either the a-hole because I said it couldn't be done and then he does it, or I'm the a-hole because I said it couldn't be done, then he doesn't do it. Now is right.
Yeah,
I can't win in this spot, but I don't know. We'll see.
Delete his number from your contact. You're not allowed to talk to Chris Holtman ever again.
Fair enough. West Virginia.
Between him and Nico Medved, you sure are making a lot of enemies out there.
I know. What can you say? Well, watch before you cross. That's all I gotta say. West Virginia hires Darren DeVries. He was Ren Baker's top choice. This is like. Not after the fact he got him. He was actually, because there was a lot about Mark Byington. We'll get to him in a second. But Darren DeVries, I had heard that, I don't know, a month before. And Ren Baker tried to keep that pretty quiet. But he comes over from Drake, made 3 tournaments in 6 seasons, critically bringing his son Tucker.
Yeah, you get an accomplished coach and an All-American.
Correct. And like Tucker DeVries, I presume he will be deployed correctly, will have a shot at top 20-ish status in the country player-wise next season. And he's the biggest name. They got Sincere Harris from Illinois. They got more to fill on that. But 5-year deal. I think he's – I'm going to give you my 5 best fits right now. My 5 best fits, I think, in order are Kyle Smith, DeVries, Muss, Dusty May, and then I think Mark Pope, which is different from like the 5 I think will have the best. Those are the 5 best fits. And I think DeVries is a sneaky good fit. I think he's got a chance at being a guy that lasts a decade plus at West Virginia. Again, in this climate, who the heck knows? But I really do. it's a good hire. It's not a sexy hire, not a big splashy hire. I think Ren Baker did a really good job. If you look at where the hell we were 10 months ago with Bob Huggins and all of that, to now you get a pretty accomplished coach who's no nonsense, easy to work with, considered to be a really good guy, good family. Oh, by the way, his son just happens to be one of the best players in the sport. I like it.
Yeah, the hire, I don't know, took me down I don't know. I saw an interview, local television interview with Huggs. Did you see that?
I did. Well, no, but I don't know how recent the one you're referring to, because I want to say Huggs put his name out there for like the DePaul job or something at some point on an interview.
Louisville job in an interview.
Was it? It might have been that too. I don't know.
It just made me sad.
Yeah.
It showed just an incredible lack of self-awareness of where you are in the world right now.
Yeah.
To think that you should maybe be in conversations with Louisville to be the next head coach there, given how things ended at West Virginia. Obviously, from a resume perspective, like, sure, but, there's other stuff. And then there was an interview after Darren got hired. I think I saw this right. Somebody called him somewhere, and they were like, hey, has new coach reached out to you? And he's like, he did, but I just told him now's not a good time for me to talk, really. It just felt sort of sad, like he hadn't moved on the way you hope that he would, that he's still carrying around some bitterness and resentment. Yeah. And maybe that's natural. I don't know. I've never been through something like what he's had to go through in a very public way. But it just sort of made me, he just didn't seem, he seemed thinner. So he seemed like he might be taking better care of himself, but it seemed just kind of sad. Like I would like to hear, even I remember, because you and I, we might have been in Augusta or somewhere. I just remember the summer after Tommy Lloyd got hired at Arizona.
Yeah.
We sat with Tommy, and he talked about how Sean was very welcoming and said, hey, yeah, come pick me up. Let's go spend some time together. And I just remember how much that meant to Tommy, because Sean got pushed out of there too, same way for different reasons, but he had every right to be bitter, I guess, if you want to carry that around. And yet he was welcoming in a way that I think all people who are succeeding, really accomplished guys, or in Huggs' case, legends, would like for them to be. And it just, what I took away from it was it seemed like Huggs wasn't quite there yet, the way I'd like to see him be there. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think there's something to that. And that's all. That's quite frankly, that's very much an element there. And with other potential candidates that were interviewed for the job, that is something that was under consideration as a factor as to whether or not they were.
Because the next head coach of West Virginia has to win over Huggs people who still love Huggs.
That's right.
And would rather Huggs be the coach still today than you.
Yes, that is a factor there. I think DeVries is equipped to handle it, and I think he's a really good fit there. Also think Kyle Smith is a good fit. Stanford was the one that followed after West Virginia. We talked about him. I think he's going to do well, and I think that he will get Stanford to the tournament. That's all you can ask for. It's a very, very tough job. Its NIL situation is different than almost everyone else. Admissions, everything that comes with Stanford, very, very tough. I think he's very built for it, though. I really like the hire. Washington also, I think it was Stanford, Washington, Vandy all closed in like an 8-hour span. Washington has Danny Sprinkle. He's on a 6-year deal there. Still waiting on roster stuff. Excuse me. Zoom Diallo, big commit, has not, as far as I can tell, has not reaffirmed his commitment and not decommitted. So if they can keep him there, that'll be a big win. He's got more to do from a player standpoint. Adding Tony Bland to the staff, though, that's not official, but it will happen. And if you're wondering, Tony Bland, how do I know that name? Tony Bland was one of the assistants who was put on trial and arrested in the FBI case. He has served his time literally and his show cause. Really, really awesome of Danny Sprinkle to do this and add former USC assistant Tony Bland, who has a very, very good reputation. And the stuff that he got arrested for and had to serve time for, we don't have the time to go down that road, but outrageous, and carries a very, despite being connected to all that stuff, has a very, very good reputation. And it's really cool to see him get another chance. Now we wait to see who will do the same of Book Richardson and perhaps even Lamont Evans. Vandy hired Mark Byington. They are going to have more roster movement here in the next couple of days, maybe by the weekend, but added Rick Ray from Colorado. That's a good one. Tommy Ostrom from Drake is a good one. Brought over some guys from JMU. Byington was not Vandy's first choice. He basically became the option. Vandy wanted Sprinkle. Vandy wanted Dusty May. That's the other thing. Oh, by the way, Dusty May gave Vandy a real moment to consider. He wasn't going to go there, but he was taken by him. Go ahead.
And I saw people rolling their eyes at that, it makes a lot of sense to me. Like Vanderbilt, for a certain type of person, is a great job. SEC, private school, incredible city. That's the type of job that, like, if like, I know Bryce Drew was the coach there, and I think Bryce Drew was the coach there in part because of all the stuff that I'm saying. I think that the Vanderbilt situation is desirable more than I think your typical college basketball person might understand, just because of all the other stuff beyond the basketball program.
I would completely agree with you on that. And the fact that Byington is not he wouldn't have been on the top 10 most likely names I would have given you, but Vandy engaged with him the night he beat Wisconsin, and he became a real candidate there. And then that was done basically the night they lost to Duke. I guess it might have been technically done really early the next morning, but I don't think so. I think it was done that night. Just kind of, listen, man, some of these are going to work faster than normal. The Vandy search was like a little bit up and down. Some of these were Vandy, like a lot of people thought they were going to go with Chris Mack. They didn't. Mack wound up at Charleston. Again, I promised you we'd get to some mid-major hires, and we're up against it here, but I promise we'll mention those. But Byington is I think he's probably a pretty good get. He's coming off, 32 wins program record at JMU, and you are dead on about that. It holds a higher steam than people realize. And oh, by the way, Vandy had to rally, I was told, in the neighborhood of $20 million to pay off Stackhouse, which is just unreal to think Vanderbilt men's basketball committed that much, but commit that much it did. And then last one is Steve Lutz, who's at Oklahoma State. He doesn't have big roster ads yet. That's coming. I think a big thing with Oklahoma State is raising, as it is, we're everywhere, but in particular, some spots that didn't have good NIL, like getting that number above 2 million, and they are getting there. I like the hire because he had an assistant named Robert Guster, and Robert Guster is now an assistant at Oklahoma State. Shouts to Guster. Guster's for lovers. That's good stuff. Lutz, by the way, made the tournament at Corpus Christi and Western Kentucky the past couple of years, so he was not choice 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 for Oklahoma State. That was a winding search and a weird search behind the scenes at certain stages there. But they got a guy who, by the way, recruited Zach Edey, told Matt Painter. Painter gets, understandably, he's attached to all the big guys, but it was Lutz when he was at Purdue that was pretty insistent that Zach Edey would become a very, very good college player, 2-time National Player of the Year. So Lutz is there at Oklahoma State, replaces Mike Boynton, and those are your high major additions there. Quickly, non-conference power note. I'm going to give you the schools. You give me your thoughts. I'll roll them off and tell me what you think on any of them. Charleston hires Chris Mack. Oh boy, that's a big one there. He wanted to get back in, didn't get Vandy, lands at Charleston. That's among the most treasured mid-major jobs in the country. As previously mentioned, FAU replaces Dusty May with John Jacobs, who won a national championship under Scott Drew at Baylor, and now he gets his first crack. A lot of people thought that FAU and Danny White, the AD there, might go with the sitting head coach, but Jacobs got in there and he got it done. Josh Schertz, as long expected, went to St. Louis from Indiana State, and he got himself a really good deal. And oh, by the way, Robbie Avila and Isaiah Swope are going with him, and that will be huge for that program in the A-10. Utah State's in the Mountain West, so it's a notable job. Of course, Sprinkle left for Washington. We'll see how Sprinkle does at UW, which I think is a sleeping giant of a program. We'll see if he can really get it rolling there. Jared Calhoun gets that job from Youngstown State. So something of an anonymous coach, but he's had actually a couple of good in-house wins and not having guys leave via the portal there. Washington State is dropping down from the Pac-12 to the WCC. It gets David Riley from Eastern Washington. So it's certainly notable because otherwise it would have been a power conference job. We would have noted it otherwise. But it's in the WCC for the next 2 years. James Madison, after losing Byington to Vandy, got Preston Spradlin. And I do think that's a quietly very, very good hire, almost like a DeVries to West Virginia kind of deal. You tell me Preston Spradlin is coaching a power conference program by 2027. I absolutely believe you. He's young. Keep an eye on it. If you can keep it going at JMU, also extremely good mid-major program with a huge alumni fan base. And then 2 more for you, GP. Ben McCollum is now the coach at Drake, replacing DeVries. McCollum has won multiple Division II championships. He is known for his high-level acumen. He has also turned down a litany of jobs in the past, and people are wondering, is this guy ever going to do this? Like, what's the holdup? Well, Drake is the spot. We'll see if he can have success there. And then I got to mention Dan Munson because he got fired, stayed with the program, made the tournament unexpectedly, gave Arizona a game, and Dan Munson didn't retire. He was fired. Guess where he is? Eastern Washington. So he goes back up to the Pacific Northwest, where once upon a time, he coached a school named Gonzaga to the Elite Eight in 1999. Yes, folks. older ones know this, but Munson, not Mark Few, was the coach when they made the Elite Eight in '99 and really splashed on the scene. He lands at Eastern Washington, and I think that's really awesome because he's in his 60s. People thought, he'll just retire. No, he wasn't done. He didn't want to be done. He lands back on his feet. I think that's a really, really cool under the radar story after the fact there for him to get that gig. Any other or any of those mid-major hiring stand out to you? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm done at the mid-major level, like proclaiming I'm sure this is going to work or I'm certain this won't, because there's just so many variables.
Yes,
I mean,
and more now than ever. Yeah.
More now than ever. It's just it's hard to predict. And I've been doing this long enough to know that I've seen guys I thought were no-brainers. There's no way this doesn't work, and it just doesn't work. And I've seen guys I'm like, I don't know if this is going to work, and it does.
And that being said, which one do you like most?
Josh Schertz to St. Louis.
Yeah.
I think they hired above his. First off, I think that when people start talking about candidates to join the Big East years ago, I had thrown out St. Louis multiple times. I just think that
yeah,
with the right situation, it's a beautiful on-campus arena, relatively new. It's a great city. They do have a natural recruiting base.
Yes.
And I think St. Louis hired above its,
probably
a little bit above the level.
Schertz had a very, 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 very real chance of getting Louisville, by the way.
That's right. I think they hired.
I actually think Kelsey could be the guy. I think if Indiana State made the tournament, he might have been the coach at Louisville.
There we go. Yeah. So I think they hired somebody that they are fortunate to have based on just like what else was out there and what else he could have theoretically gotten. So I like that one. Chris Mack at Charleston,
seems pretty good, man.
Honestly, that seems so good for Charleston that it was a little surprising to me. I thought Chris's next job would be bigger than Charleston, but some of this is also family stuff.
Yeah.
It's just like I remember talking to Chris right after, he moved on from Louisville, and I was, it's just, these guys, and I know that we cover them and it's a business, but you do get to know these guys. And on some level, it's like somebody just got fired. Like, that's not a fun day. So not always, but sometimes I'll try to reach out and just, hey, just thinking of you. And I know, listen, you get $20 million or $10 million or whatever you get, and your problems are smaller than most people's problems, but getting fired is not fun. And I remember he was just like, I think I said something along the lines of, listen, man, it's not like this thing got ran into the ground. You still have to look at your Wikipedia page when you get a shot. You've done some pretty incredible stuff. And, if you want to get back in, whenever you want to get back in, there'll be a job waiting on you. And I just remember him saying something along the lines of, I might just, coach my kids.
Yeah.
I don't, he really is involved. He's one of the guys, we'd land in Vegas and we would be sitting at baggage claim, waiting for your bags, and there's Chris Mack, the Xavier coach, with his daughter, bringing her out on the road recruiting. That's a good call.
Yeah.
So Charleston, I think everybody knows it. It's an amazing city. Like famous people move to Charleston. Danny McBride, played. He's in. He's Founded Down and Vice Principals and all those HBO shows. He's tremendous. He went and filmed something in Charleston and just decided this place is great. Let's just moved his whole family from LA to Charleston. So it's an amazing place to be. I think that played a role, but I'm a little surprised that Chris Mack's job after Louisville is the head coach in a school at a one bid league. I didn't think that would be
fair, but it's considered unquestionably a top 10 mid-major job, if not top 5.
Sure.
So that's, and he was in there at Vandy, and he's serious about doing it. So we'll see on that. But yeah, the Schertz one, the Mac one, those are big. Everyone that I mentioned, I think is notable for one reason or another. But yeah.
And let me just say, I'm happy for Scott Spinelli to get the Chicago State job.
Yep.
I've known Scott for a long time, and he's been like an assistant coach for 30 years at the collegiate level. So for him to get an opportunity, I mean, good luck. But
Chicago State going to the NEC though.
Yeah. So I'm not going to sit here and say I know it'll work or what. I'm happy for him to get that shot. And then seeing some of the, Ed Schilling I've known Ed
Yeah.
for 20 years. He was an assistant at Memphis when I was the beat writer. Seeing him get back in, Vance Wahlberg, who was an assistant for
inventor of the
Calipari.
dribble drive motion offense, folks.
Yes, he invented the it was like I wrote that whole story. I was there for the John Calipari, like that way that whole thing happened was John Calipari is just talking to me one day. We're just talking, and I'm like, "So what have you been up to?"
Yeah,
and he's like, "Oh well, I went out to California and visited with a JUCO coach." What? He's like, "Yeah, he runs this offense. I'm trying to learn it." Next thing you know, Vance Wahlberg's like coming to Memphis, and that's how dribble drive was a thing. So Vance getting back in, I like that.
Konzo Martin to Missouri State
Konzo
returning
Martin.
back. That'll be very interesting. I think that's got a lot of potential as well.
Yeah. So it's just, again, there's so many variables at the mid-major level. It's kind of a fool's game to start talking in absolutes about it. But I'm a believer in Chris Mack. I'm a believer in Josh Schertz. There's some familiar names on this list, and it was, I smiled when I saw some of them.
Exhausting but fun carousel season. Look at us going more than 90 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Come on now. Worth it?
I don't know.
It was a good show. It was a good show. But I really hope this is true. Longest show of our entire offseason. If you appreciated it, find us and let us know. By the way, Nada, let's link the coaching carousel recap in the episode description so people can scroll through all 63. We have gone longer than I ever thought. I have to go get my kids right now from school, so we have to end this episode.
How about this? I talked for 2 hours, drove home for 30 minutes, talked for another hour 35. I've been talking for roughly 4 straight hours. I've had enough of this.
But it was a wonderful conversation, and thank you for doing this one with me, GP. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for doing it with me. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Terry, MF and Teagle. He's a legend. Shouts to Huck and Larnell. Thank you guys once again for watching, listening to the Iron College Basketball Podcast. More of us than there are of them. That should be reflected in the comments and Spotify.
Caleb Williams and us, by the way. Caleb Williams definitely in us. So just so we're clear. Bears #1 pick on Thursday. Yeah, no doubt. Let's go.
I'm just going to move on from that one.
Okay, let's go.
We'll talk to you again real soon. Till then, take care.